Welcome back to Creation Magazine Live. In our next segment, we've got an interesting question to ask from this article.
Would Darwin be a Darwinist today,
Well,
if he'd lived today? That's the question that this article asks. This is from volume 31, number 4. It's got the little opossum on the cover there. Would Darwin be a Darwinist today?
and who wrote this?
This is by Don Batten.
Oh,
Don from our Australian office. Charles Darwin did some good science. Some of his research, such as that on coral growth, marine atolls, and the important role of earthworms, stands today. On the other hand, he was a creature of his time, a time dominated by deistic ideas that God was remote and the universe ran itself according to natural laws. Among the intelligentsia, natural theology, the study of nature to find God, had largely replaced the Bible, revelation from God himself. With the influence of James Hutton and Charles Lyell, ideas of vast ages of slow and gradual change had taken root, overturning the earlier acceptance of a biblical history where creation and the flood accounted for the rocks and fossils. Into this context, Darwin's idea of natural processes explaining the origin of life's diverse forms, found acceptance. But would Darwin be a Darwinist if he were alive today?
right.
Now that's the question. Now in this program, and obviously we're taking articles from the magazine, and on creation.com, there's loads and loads and loads of information against Darwinian evolution.
Right.
So
So if he could examine the information that we have today, would he come to the same conclusion?
Yeah. Should we give away the conclusion? Let's just keep reading. The origin of life. The origin of species. In The Origin of Species, Darwin concentrated on the origin of the diversity of life. In a letter to botanist Joseph Hooker in 1863, Darwin lamented having pandered to public opinion in writing in Origin of the first life form into which life was first breathed. That's a quote, "into which life is first breathed," he wrote, as if he believed in divine creation. Yet he conceded, "It is mere rubbish thinking at present of the origin of life. One might as well think of the origin of matter." However, 8 years later, consistent with his drive to explain origins entirely materialistically, he speculated if, and oh what a big if, we could conceive of some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat, electricity, etc., present, that a protein compound was chemically formed, ready to undergo still more complex changes, end quote.
So this refutes what I've heard some skeptics say. Well, Darwinist, he actually believed in God. He just, it's just a scientific theory, natural selection, all that kind of stuff. He believed in God because they'll use that quote from the original quote, that the first life form that was breathed into, but he didn't believe that. He was pandering to public opinion. He wanted to seem a little more reasonable at the time. That would indicate complete atheism, and that really wasn't cool in that society, so we're just going to pander to public opinion, etc.
Right, yes. At that time, scientists knew that organisms such as insects did not form spontaneously, but they continued to speculate about microbes. These seemed fairly simple, blobs of jelly, and so many thought that they would arise spontaneously. However, creationist scientist Louis Pasteur, a contemporary of Darwin, showed that microbes did not form spontaneously either. Today, with so much more known about the complexity of even the simplest living things, the origin of life has become an intractable problem for those who refuse to believe in creation. Cells are not mere blobs of jelly. They are incredibly complex assemblages of nanomachines that Darwin could not have conceived in the slightest way. And they are full of programs, software, information that specify how to construct and operate each living cell with its thousands of nanomachines that are essential to life. Professor Paul Davies admitted, "How did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software?"
And he's an evolutionist.
And he's an evolutionist.
Yeah.
And what a good question.
Right.
How did atoms, so from matter, how can you write your own software to know what to do with matter? It's a huge problem for evolutionists.
Yeah.
And he goes on to say, nobody knows. There's no known law of physics able to create information from nothing. Daily, new discoveries add to our knowledge of the breathtaking complexity of life, making the idea of spontaneous origin of life more and more untenable. Anthony Flew, famous hard-nosed English atheistic philosopher, abandoned atheism because of the weight of evidence from these modern discoveries. He said, "It now seems to me that the findings of more than 50 years of DNA research have provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design."
Wow.
This research, he goes on to say, has shown by the most by almost unbelievably complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved. So
Right.
here's an atheist, that debated Christian.
Not just any atheist. Anthony Flew was kind of like, you know, he was the top atheist for many years. Debated atheism, wrote books about it. He was, you know, so for him to switch was huge.
It was big news.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, Darwin goes on to talk about natural selection and how natural selection might fit in with that. Of course, Darwin didn't invent natural selection, and the article goes on here to talk about that as well.
So first it talks about origin of life and the fact that Darwin thought, well, it could be simple enough, it could come together.
Microbes might spontaneously
Now
evolve.
we know that it's not simple at all. Then he goes on to the diversity, the natural selection, changing one kind of thing into another kind.
But that's not a creative process either. At
Right.
best, it keeps populations of living things from degenerating, but it's not a creative process.
Right.
He talks about transitional fossils as well. Darwin said, "The number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed on the Earth must be truly enormous. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record. We should not forget that only a small portion of the world is known with accuracy."
So at his time, he was admitting geology is the biggest problem for my theory here. The transitional fossils aren't there, but we'll find them as we look into the fossil record.
So that was in the mid-1800s when
Yep.
he said that. Darwin expected that once researchers looked for the in-between transitional fossils, they would find them. However, in 150 years, they have not found them. As Robert Carroll, well-known paleontologist, said, "What is missing are the many intermediate forms hypothesized by Darwin." So here we are today. Darwin expected the transitional fossils, they're not here.
Right.
And he goes on to talk about other things, or the article goes on to talk about other things as well. So would Darwin be a Darwinist today? The article wraps up this way. Given the grand failure to fulfill Darwin's expectations, we might think that he would not be a Darwinist today if he were alive. However, this is not the evidence that drives belief in evolution, as can be readily seen by reading the vitriol of zealous advocates of evolution. As from the beginning, evolution means naturalism. Nature is all there is. There is no need for God to explain our origins. Indeed, Darwin made no secret of his view that he did not believe religion to have any rational foundation at all. And that's a quote again.
Right.
Darwin embraced materialism as a young man. As such, if he were alive today, he may well be like the materialists of today who are given to futile thinking. You can have a look at Romans 1:21 and 22. Like Professor of Genetics Richard Lewontin, who wrote that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door.
So really what it's saying is that Darwin may not have been a Darwinist, he might not believe in Darwinian evolution or neo-Darwinian evolution, but he would believe in some kind of self-creation.
That's right.
If you're going to be an atheist, you must believe in some kind of self-creation. For more information like this, check us out on the website creation.com.